Okay, ready to dive into some dense material.
Let's do it. Always up for a challenge.
We're going deep into Carlos Castaneda and his experiences with Don Juan, that Yaqui sorcerer.
Yeah, his books really get you thinking, don't they?
It's a lot to unpack. But the stuff about perception, sorcery, what Don Juan calls seeing, that's what really grabbed me.
Right. It makes you question everything you think you know about, like, reality itself.
Exactly. He's not talking about just opening your eyes wider, is he?
No, not at all. Don Juan makes it very clear. Seeing is not the same as looking. Not even close.
Okay, so how does he explain the difference?
Yes.
Because I feel like I keep tripping over those words, seeing versus looking.
Well, he uses the example of Castaneda meeting his friend Don Gennaro, who's also a sorcerer.
Yeah.
And Don Gennaro, he does these incredible things like walking across a waterfall.
Wait, he walks across a waterfall, literally.
Literally. Or at least that's how Castaneda describes it.
And that's supposed to help Castaneda see? I don't get it.
Well, Castaneda is so busy trying to write everything down, he misses the point entirely.
He's stuck in looking, right? Just fixated on the physical act.
Exactly. And Don Juan calls him out on it. He says, seeing is not a matter of talk. It's not a matter of looking and keeping quiet. Seeing is a technique one has to learn.
So how do you learn it? Is that where the little smoke comes in? That hallucinogenic mixture he keeps giving Castaneda?
The little smoke definitely seems to play a role. It's like it allows Castaneda to glimpse this other reality, a reality that's hidden from his normal senses.
Like when he freaks out about the Guardian, that terrifying creature?
What turns out to be a gnat.
Exactly. It shows how our perception can be so easily tricked.
Totally. And Don Juan even says, the world when you see is not as you think it is now. It's rather a fleeting world that moves and changes.
So reality itself is fluid, always changing.
That's one way to interpret it. And Don Juan suggests there are beings that exist in this other reality, beings he calls allies.
Those are the other entities that Castaneda starts to encounter, right?
Exactly. Like the man beckoning to him in the field. Don Juan explains these are allies, beings that are normally hidden from us.
But interacting with them, that's part of what a sorcerer learns to do.
Right. But Don Juan makes it clear this isn't some game. It's serious business. He emphasizes the importance of living like a warrior.
What does that even mean, living like a warrior?
It's about taking responsibility for your actions, for your perception. It's about facing challenges head on.
Even if those challenges are terrifying, like confronting a guardian that turns out to be a gnat.
Especially then, because sometimes the things we fear the most are just illusions created by our own limited perception.
Okay, that's kind of mind-blowing. So how do we break free from those limitations? Is it all about the little smoke?
Don Juan would probably say it's more about the intention. You can't just stumble into seeing. It's a practice, a discipline.
And are there tools that can help? Because we haven't even touched on this whole spirit catcher thing.
Oh, right. That mysterious instrument Don Juan uses.
It's like, what, a musical instrument? How does it work?
It's described as a stringed instrument that Don Juan uses to interact with, well, unseen forces.
Like at that dry water hole, he uses it there, right?
Right. It's almost like he's using it to communicate with the spirit of the place, to draw something out that's normally hidden.
Okay, now that is fascinating. So we've got seeing, allies, the spirit catcher, and we haven't even touched on stopping the world.
We're just getting started.
Don Juan definitely doesn't make it easy for Castaneda or for us.
Or for us, try and make sense of it all, but that's what makes it so compelling.
Definitely keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Exactly. It's a wild ride, but definitely worth it for the insights you can glean along the way. And speaking of insights, we've got to talk about controlled folly. Don Juan keeps coming back to this idea, and I think it's one of the most important concepts he introduces.
Controlled folly. Okay, you're going to have to explain that one. It sounds almost like an oxymoron. How can folly be controlled?
That's the beauty of it. It's about finding that balance between acting with intention and letting go of the outcome. Don Juan says, a man of knowledge likes whatever or whoever he wants, but he uses his controlled folly to be unconcerned about it.
So it's like choosing what you want but not being attached to the result.
Exactly. It's about surrendering to the moment, trusting that whatever happens is part of a larger plan, even if you don't understand it.
Which honestly feels relevant to everyday life, even if you're not trying to be a sorcerer.
Absolutely. It's about accepting what is, letting go of the need to control everything, and finding that sense of peace and freedom within yourself.
And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. But don't go anywhere, listeners, because we're just getting started. When we come back, we'll dive even deeper into these mind-bending concepts and explore what they might mean for us in our own lives. All right, so last time we left off with this whole idea of stopping the world. Is he talking literally, like pausing reality, or is it more of a metaphorical thing?
That's the thing about Don Juan. He always keeps you guessing. He dances between those literal and metaphorical interpretations constantly.
Which can be frustrating when you want a straight answer.
Tell me about it. But I guess that's part of the point. It's about getting you to think differently, to break free from your ordinary way of seeing things.
So, okay, back to stopping the world. He says it's a technique sorcerers can use. Do we know how they actually, do it?
Well, he gives us some clues, but it's never spelled out exactly. Remember that scene at the dry water hole when he uses the spirit catcher?
Yeah, the mysterious musical instrument thing.
Right. It's like he's trying to draw something out to interact with a layer of reality that's normally hidden from us.
And he says Castaneda will eventually make his own spirit catcher too, right?
Exactly. It's like he's suggesting this ability, the seeing, isn't limited to just a select few.
But he also says we're surrounded by these holes in the sounds, these messages we're just not quick enough to grasp.
It's like we're moving too slow. Our perception is too sluggish to pick up on what's really going on around us.
So we need more speed. We need to think faster.
Not exactly. He's talking about a different kind of speed, a heightened awareness that allows you to perceive things that are usually too subtle, too fleeting for the ordinary mind to grasp.
And I'm guessing the little smoke can help with that.
It seems to, but Don Juan's also very clear that it's not about just getting high and seeing weird stuff.
It's about intention.
Exactly. You have to approach those experiences with respect, with discipline. Otherwise, you're just messing with forces you don't understand.
And there are some forces you definitely don't want to mess with, right? Like those allies. They're not all friendly, are they?
He makes it very clear that there are risks involved, that not all encounters are going to be pleasant.
Hence the whole warrior thing. You have to be prepared to face whatever comes up.
Exactly. And not just face it, but confront it head on.
Even if it terrifies you.
Especially then. Remember what he tells Castaneda about the Guardian? He says, "You cannot will the Guardian to disappear. Your will can stop it from harming you, though." Of course, if you ever accomplish that, the road is open to you. You can actually go by the Guardian and there's nothing that it can do, not even whirl around madly. He's saying that sometimes the best way to deal with fear is not to run from it, but to understand it.
Because sometimes the things we're most afraid of are just illusions created by our own minds.
Exactly. And once you see through the illusion, the fear loses its power.
Which kind of takes us back to stopping the world, doesn't it? It's about shifting your perception, seeing things from a different angle.
And maybe, in doing so, you realized you had more control than you thought. Not control over the situation, necessarily, but control over your own reaction, your own perception of it.
Which is a pretty empowering thought. So how do we do it? How do we stop the world?
Well, if Don Juan's teachings tell us anything, it's that there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
It's a journey.
Exactly. And it's a journey that requires us to question everything we think we know, to be willing to step outside of our comfort zones, and to embrace the unknown.
Which sounds both terrifying and incredibly exciting.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it?
It's like, on one hand, we have the potential to experience reality in a completely different way.
But to do that, we have to be willing to let go of our old ways of seeing things, our old beliefs and assumptions.
And that can be scary. But maybe it's also the key to unlocking a whole new level of human potential. And speaking of unlocking potential, we haven't even touched on that whole encounter with the sorceress in the valley. Okay, so we've talked about seeing, the spirit catcher, stopping the world.
Yeah.
But there's this other part of the transcript you shared that I keep coming back to, that whole thing with the woman in the valley.
Ah, you mean the sorceress. Yeah, that's definitely one of the most intense parts of Castaneda's story.
Intense, and also kind of vague, right? Don Juan is all like, we have to go defend ourselves. She's powerful. But he doesn't tell Castaneda who she is, why she's a threat. He's just like, grab a rifle. We're going on an adventure.
Classic Don Juan, always keeping Castaneda on his toes.
And Castaneda, to his credit, he goes along with it, even though he's obviously terrified. I mean, would you go wandering around in the middle of the night with just a rifle because someone said, trust me, there might be a sorceress?
Probably not. But then I guess I wouldn't learn how to see, would I?
True that, but then nothing really happens, right? At least not in the way Castaneda expects.
Oh, yeah.
He waits all night to see this sorceress in flight,
Yeah,
which don't nothing.
It's like that whole thing with the holes and the sounds. He's looking for something specific, something that fits into his preconceived idea of what a sorceress should be.
And because he's so focused on that, he misses what's actually there.
Exactly. Don Juan even hints at this, saying you're looking for something you know you're not seeing.
So it's like our expectations can actually blind us.
Totally. If we're so stuck in our own heads, trying to make things fit into neat little boxes, we miss the bigger picture.
Which I guess is kind of the whole point of Don Juan's teachings, isn't it? To break free from those boxes.
Right. It's about expanding your awareness, being open to the possibility that reality is far stranger and more wonderful than we can imagine.
And sometimes scarier, too, right? Because he does give Castaneda that wild boar tusk.
And tells him to stab her with it, yeah.
I mean, talk about a mind trip. Poor Castaneda is freaking out, worried about what will happen if he actually does it.
Yeah.
What will happen to Don Juan?
It's another test, isn't it? Another way for Don Juan to push Castaneda outside of his comfort zone, to force him to confront his fears and make a choice.
Because even if the sorceress isn't real, in the literal sense, the fear Castaneda feels is very real.
Exactly. And that's what Don Juan is trying to get him to see. It's not about whether the sorceress is real or not. It's about how you choose to respond to the fear, to the unknown.
So it's not that this other reality is separate from our everyday lives. It's more like we have the power to choose how we experience it.
Right. It's like those optical illusions where you can see two different images depending on how you look at it. The image itself doesn't change, but your perception of it does.
Which is a pretty amazing way to think about it, isn't it? That we have more control over our reality than we realize.
Absolutely. And it's not about denying the existence of challenges or difficulties. It's about choosing how you relate to them, how you let them shape your experience.
So how do we do that? How do we choose to see the world differently?
Well, if Don Juan's teachings tell us anything, it's that it's not about finding all the answers in a book or a podcast.
It's about the journey.
Exactly. It's about being willing to question everything, to experiment, to make mistakes, and to keep learning and growing along the way.
To be open to seeing things in a new way, even if it means challenging everything we thought we knew.
Because in the words of Don Juan himself, the world is such a mysterious and awesome place that to take it for granted is a waste. We have to be alert. We have to learn to see.
And maybe, just maybe, if we can learn to see, we'll discover a reality that's far richer and more extraordinary than we ever imagined. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring.